Do you need a break? Maybe you're feeling burnt out. Maybe you just want more freedom in your life, maybe a little bit of both. I know myself and my guest, Katrina, can definitely understand where you're at right now because we've been in your shoes. And the good news is that you've got options. So today we are going to talk about the terms career break and sabbatical. A lot of times they're used kind of interchangeably, but there are some differences that we're going to cover today. So keep on watching because I am joined with Katrina, who is literally writing the book on career breaks. She's just wrapped up and will be publishing and releasing her book in November for taking a career break for dummies. So very, very excited to have her here. Welcome, Katrina.
Thanks for having me, Susie. I'm so excited to be doing this with you.
And for those of you who don't know you, I'd love if you could share a little bit about you professionally, of course, but also personally, a little bit about your background and how you got to writing a book on career breaks.
Yeah. Okay. I'll try to make this, I'll try to give the condensed version. So I started my first career as an actuary, and I was working in healthcare and very math intensive job, but was not my ultimate sort of end game. And I knew that, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So I went to get my MBA, changed careers, became a market researcher, relocated out to Minnesota, and started working and realized it wasn't just the job. It was sort of, for me, it was corporate life in general, but also this building sense of feeling burned out, but also just like I wanted to go live. I really wanted to travel. It was something I had never really had the chance to do. And I had this burning desire to go see places in the world. And my bucket list was so much longer than my annual, like 15 days of PTO a year would allow. And I had this moment where I was like, if it's not now, it's probably never. So let it be now. And I worked with a life coach to have this realization that I could give myself permission to just travel and quit my job. That was not something that seemed responsible, reasonable, sane at the time. This was like 2011, and like nobody was talking about this. So I decided to do it, but I only had $1,500 in my bank account. So I worked really hard, saved $40,000 in 18 months, and then quit my job to travel around the world for 20 months until I ran out of money. And when I was realizing I needed to come back, I knew I wanted to pay off all of my student loan debt as fast as possible. So I decided to go back to corporate and find a better job that was more aligned with my interests and my values. And the most amazing thing was I landed 5 job offers in just 5 weeks from the moment I had finished updating my resume. Yeah, and put it up online. And that was where the seed was planted. I think it clicked for me that not only is a career break amazing and sort of internally life changing, but it can also benefit your professional life and benefit your career. And it was like, I need to help more people do this someday. I wasn't quite ready then. But I went back to corporate, paid off all my debt in less than 2 years. It was about 42K, and then got certified as a life coach. And so for the last 6 years, I have been a life coach and a career break coach, helping people take breaks. And I counted it up the other day. I'm at 70. So I've supported 70 career breaks and sabbaticals to date, which is thank you.
Amazing.
Yeah. It's so meaningful and rewarding. And, that work that I've been doing over the last several years caught the attention of the For Dummies publisher, Wiley. And so they reached out to me in November of last year, asked me to write Taking a Career Break for Dummies, and hundreds of hours later, and like 9 months of writing and then rewriting, I just finished sending off all of the final edits on Sunday. So the book is like out of my hands into production now and will be coming out in November.
Crazy.
How'd I do?
Amazing. And I mean, we've talked before. Hopefully that's obvious. I didn't know that you were an actuary, and I have kind of an absurd amount of actuary friends. It's like, I don't know. It's really wild. But so when you said that, I was like, oh, really?
Yeah, that makes sense.
But really interesting parallel that both Katrina and I found out through individual LinkedIn posts is that we departed on our big, I mean, for you, 20 months, for me, it was a year. Our big adventure, the huge leap
Yeah.
within a week of each other. And that was 10 years ago.
Mhm.
Just a few weeks ago, it was 10 years. So that was really kind of just parallel lives. And then I started my business 2016. So like around the same time. So really kind of crazy that we, did corporate career break and then back to
Yeah, so many
corporate
mirrors.
and
Yeah.
figured out, how to take that passion and the things that we've both realized that those breaks have given us personally and professionally. I mean, you do make a really good point, the clarity that you can get. So I'm sure when you came back and you wrote a resume and got those 5 job offers, it was because you had the clarity on what you wanted.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say I used and viewed my career break as an asset, not a red flag. And so I leaned into this is a distinguishing quality. This is a distinguishing event, in my life. And I have something different than everyone else that you're about to interview. And so I leaned into it and I highlighted it in a way to make it seen as an asset versus a hindrance. And I think that really helped as well.
Absolutely. So for my situation, I got a leave of absence from my employer. So I returned back to the same job, but my husband, he looked for another job. So for him, it was a true career break. He came back and he was a little bit nervous again about the break
Yeah.
because from what most people see, that it would be like a bad thing. But
Yeah.
when you spin it in a good way, I mean, the interviews that he had, people only wanted to talk about that because it's
My experience was like half of my interview questions were like, where was your favorite place? Where did you go? What was the hardest part? Like, yeah, for sure.
yeah, but I mean, there are absolutely skills that you gain, and
Mhm.
especially in this ever changing world where more and more companies are global, having that experience to be able to work with other cultures and encounter different ways of doing things, that is a huge asset. And, I think that really helped him, set him apart. The other thing that I tried to tell him beforehand, but it's hard until you're really in that position, is that it will help you choose which employer you want to work with, because the employers who see that as a bad thing, you taking
Yes.
a career break, that's not a good fit. You're not going to be a good fit for their culture anyway. So it'll make it a lot easier finding the companies where they see that as an asset, they see that as benefits, and they want that diversity of life experience in many ways. But I think that it ultimately makes the job process and job hunt, it provides more clarity, which, thinking about even beforehand making that leap, it's hard to think about it in that way. But just a simple mind shift, I think a mindset shift really helps in seeing that as, okay, if I want to do something big with my life, not wait till retirement, it's not something that will completely derail my career. And in fact, the way, if you plan it well, and with intention, it can really even be more of an asset, potentially get you even further ahead than if you didn't take a break. So,
Yeah, I like to say exactly to your point, intentional planning makes it career progression, not career regression, which is what I think a lot of people envision when they think about taking a break.
absolutely. That's such a good little one liner. I
There
like it.
you go.
So I wanted to start off, and for those of you that are watching live, I forgot to say this, and even do an intro to myself, because Katrina and I could go on forever. But let me take a quick pause, introduce myself. If you're new to me, I am Susie Chow. I help people live abroad for a month. So in this conversation, I'm, playing on Team Sabbatical. Not that it's a real competition, but it's kind of fun. We're going to go through in the rest of this discussion and talk about the differences between sabbaticals and career breaks, pros and cons of each, because I think that for so many people, they've got big dreams. I just had a conversation yesterday with somebody who's got big dreams, and it's kind of like, what's the right next step? And it may be taking that leap, kind of similar to what Katrina and I did. But it could be something smaller to like test it out and see. So I help people kind of dip their toe into the waters to travel for a month or more. So we're going to get into that. If you are joining us live or on the replay, let us know where you are joining in from in the comments so we know you're watching. And at any point, pop in questions. This is a live discussion for a reason. So if anything that we say is confusing, doesn't make sense, or spurs on another question in your head, we want to get to that question, and we will have time at the end to cover those. So as we go, pop in your questions into the comments, even if you are watching the replay, because we can always get to those and answer your comments after the fact. So let's get into it. Let's define what is a career break versus a sabbatical. And Katrina, I'd love to kick it over to you. How do you define a career break?
Yeah. So, sort of generally speaking, career break is when you quit your job. So there's severing of the employment and you embark on this period of unemployment. So I will add the caveat, you can absolutely, be let go from your position or sort of be forced into a break, but it becomes a break when you decide that you're going to allow this to be a period of unemployment. So for me, I distinguish a difference between somebody, whether voluntarily or involuntarily, that's in this place of unemployment and is really like using it for either, joy, learning, personal growth, recovery, something to that extent, versus somebody that is in this period of unemployment, but continually looking for their next job. I consider that more of a career gap where you just don't have a job, but it's really more of a gap. It's like you're actively trying to get back on the job market. And I think of a break as a more intentional period of time, no matter what you're going to use it for, just sort of using it for yourself as much as you are for, your professional next step. And so that's kind of how I think of a career break.
That's fantastic and timely. So the two companies that I worked for before starting my own business, they were both in the consulting world, and they both have had very big layoffs in the last, one was yesterday.
Oh, wow.
So very, very timely. And one was, over the last month or so. So I know a lot of people who have been impacted, across both of those, restructures. And it hits hard. It takes a lot of time to process, especially if it's involuntary. But
Yeah.
I like the idea of seeing that, taking a bit of lemons, turning it into lemonade, and looking at it as an opportunity of, maybe this is a time that I wasn't planning on, but you could use this time in a way that benefits you. It doesn't mean that you necessarily have to immediately hop right into searching for your next job. I mean, taking some time to just reevaluate where you're going down the path of life, how many years more you have in your career, and what you want to do with those, I think is time well spent. And I think for so many people, especially in consulting, it's almost like, well, what do I do? Like, I don't even know. I know what I don't want to do, but I don't know what I do want to do. And I think that using this as potentially an opportunity, depending on finances and, other things, but looking at it, even just that reframe can be so powerful to, as you were saying, use it in an intentional way that benefits you and can bring you clarity on what you want those next steps to be.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, you have the power to reclaim this time. So even if you entered into it involuntarily, that if you have the finances to extend, that break, or if you were given a severance and you can dedicate some of that to giving yourself space, you can reclaim it. You can make it be whatever you want to be. You can go on an adventure, you can get therapy and do some healing. Like losing a job, there is grief in that loss. You might discover that you have unfulfilled dreams or you want to learn new skills. Whatever that is, you are empowered to take ownership of it, even if you weren't the one that created it.
Absolutely. So well said.
Yeah.
So on the other side of the fence is sabbaticals. And that is usually where I think the main differences in my mind is sabbaticals, you stay with your current job. You're just taking a break. That could be something that is, some companies offer paid sabbaticals or even unpaid sabbaticals after working there for a certain number of years. But you could also create your own sabbatical and piece together some time off, paid or unpaid. And, I think that if you have the intention of returning back to that job and you just need a break, whether it's burnout or something, some other life event that's happening, then, I think that that's something that can be negotiated with your employer. And, assuming you're a good employee, your employer wants to keep you. And I've definitely said that before, but I think it's worth saying again, for a reframe, that it's not career suicide if you ask for some time off, especially if you're talking about like a month. And that seems long, especially compared in the US. A month or sorry, a week or two is kind of like the max that's acceptable.
Yeah.
You need what you need to be a good employee. So asking for what you need, that is so important. And honestly, it's something that you said that I also realized is you have to give yourself permission to do that. And that seems like it could be an easy thing, but it's like the hardest part of it all. I mean, we could probably do a whole discussion about just that thing.
Yeah.
But I would say the other distinguishing factor between career breaks and sabbaticals are usually shorter in duration. My minimum, from a definition standpoint is a month. But you could even do a sabbatical that's like 3 months, 6 months. Usually career breaks are a little bit longer, but not necessarily. It's really just a matter of being, going back to the same employer or not. And I think that you can get creative if you do want to take a sabbatical, but keep your job. There's some creative ways to do that, especially if one thing that I just had a conversation with a former colleague. She was in therapy for a long time. Her therapist suggested you should take a sabbatical. And she was able to process some paperwork to take a sabbatical using short-term disability. So I think if you are feeling burnt out and you just need a break in that way, a sabbatical could be the way to go. If it's very severe, and especially if you're planning on quitting anyway, or if you were laid off, then a career break, I think could be a good option.
Yeah.
So
I was to add on that. Like, I think, a sabbatical is a specific term, and I think of it the same way that you do, right? It's maintaining that connection to your employer and planning to return to them when it's over. But to your point, if that's not, if that specific term isn't something that your company offers, there are other leaves of absence that you could consider. Like if it is, mental, physical, there are the short-term disability or FMLA, but then also, they might have other terms. They might have like a life leave, or there might just be, like a sort of exceptional leave of absence period. So you can create a sabbatical from any type of leave. It's just that if your company offers a sabbatical, they understand what it is, and it's more of a formal process, and the benefits staying or not, and all that stuff is kind of like figured out. But You can absolutely, like, to your point, be creative in using a leave and kind of trying to retrofit it to what you need if you want to return to your job once your break is over.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get into pros and cons. Can you step me through pros and cons? I mean, you've been working with like over 70 people. I'm sure you've seen so many different scenarios. And, I think it's helpful to, at least that's the way my brain works, is if I'm contemplating taking a career break or a sabbatical, like what are the pros and cons of if I wanted to go the career break side of things?
Yeah. So this is the first chapter of the book. This is covered. So like it's all fresh in my brain. So I'm so excited I get to talk about this. So from the lens of a career break, the benefits for me are immense, but it's depending on what your situation is, as to what is right for you. So a sabbatical, like you said, you're going to return to your former employer. In contrast with a career break, it's going to open you up to a lot of possibilities. You're going to be completely free. You're not going to have to figure out, do I have boundaries while I'm on a break? If there's an emergency at work, are they allowed to reach me? Under what context can they reach me? Who can reach me? How do I transition out in a way where I'm not replacing my role, but like somebody's taking it over, and then like thinking about that re-entry. Also, if you're somebody that wants to explore new career options, whether it's because your current path doesn't feel quite right anymore, or there's this misalignment, Or if you're like, I love what I do, but I want more autonomy. I want to try to do this, and start my own business or be a freelancer or a consultant or something else. Or if you're just like, I just want to wing it and find something, completely different and just learn some new skills. Being on a break, a career break, opens you up to limitless possibilities as far as what you're going to do once it's over. I think the other big benefit, in contrast to a sabbatical, is that it can be as long as you need. You can go into a break for 6 months, which this happens to, like, I was counting this up the other day. I think it's like 30% of my clients extend their break more than 1 month beyond their original predicted length of time. And when you're on a career break, you have the power to easily do that. You can decide in month 4, I want 3 more months and keep going. You can also cut it short, but you have sort of this limitless flexibility in time, depending on your finances, of course, but you can make it be however long you need it to be versus it being very fixed. On the other hand, there are a lot more unknowns. So you take a bigger risk because you sever that tie with your employer and you don't know what's going to come next. That can be exhilarating. It can lead to better things, but it can also be incredibly stressful. And potentially, depending on what kind of sabbatical you take, you might be able to retain benefits. And when you're on a career break, you will not have benefits. You'll have to replace the benefits that you had with something like, if you're in the US, healthcare.gov coverage or private insurance or travel insurance that includes health coverage. But essentially, you'll have to figure out how to protect yourself in the way that maybe your employer was doing previously. So essentially, for me, career breaks come with more risk, but with that additional risk comes the benefit of more possibilities and being able to create, the time you need away and future changes and possibilities and career pivots if you wanted to beyond the break once you come back.
Excellent. It comes down to bigger the risk, bigger the reward.
Yes.
Potentially, I mean, if you're in the right mindset, I think that that's absolutely true. And really, sabbatical pros and cons are pretty much the inverse. But just to summarize, I would say with a sabbatical, it's definitely less risk. You don't have to quit your job. So if that's something that you're, concerned about, but you do still need a break, I think it's absolutely worth asking for that time. You potentially could earn some income during that, depending on your setup within your employer and what you negotiate. And, one idea is if you're contemplating a career break and a bigger move, what you can do is use a sabbatical as like a test run, a trial run for you to see what that could look like, and just try out. I mean, I think both of us are very much advocates of using travel during that sabbatical time, career break time. You absolutely don't have to, but I think that there's tons of benefits to traveling during that time, and being in a different environment changes your perspective almost instantly. And again, I could go on about the benefits there, but thinking about the cons of a sabbatical, Katrina mentioned that if you are still employed and, if there aren't good boundaries, it might not be a full mental break that you might need. So it really takes a lot of planning to fully transition that work, set really clear boundaries. Even if you have that, you still, the anxiety might still be in the back of your head, even if nobody's like emailing you. But, I think that could be harder to get to that place of true open mind reflection, kind of thinking of those bigger thoughts. Not impossible by any means, but it just requires more effort, more work. Could be harder to negotiate with your employer. There's just a lot more steps involved to make sure that it is a win-win, because that's what we're going for. In order for you to get buy-in with your employer, you need to kind of craft that proposal well and make sure that you're doing your job so you don't burn any bridges, to make sure that everything's taken care of, work is transitioned. And, I think that if your real root cause is burnout, I don't think that a month is likely going to be enough to solve that. From everybody that I've talked to that has like true burnout, a month is like literally just doing nothing before you can even like start to make decisions and think about things outside of just, I purely need rest. So that's a big factor too.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I think a lot of it comes down to when it's like what's right for me. It comes down to your situation, like what do you need from this time, to your point, if recovering from burnout is part of it, or like if it's some big need that's going to take months and months, right? A sabbatical might not fulfill that.
Yeah.
And how satisfied are you with your employer, right? Maybe even if you're not satisfied with your role, that you see a vision for how you could change that upon reentry, right? And like pivot to a different role within the company. But it's like, if you like things, generally speaking, then it's nice to keep that thread and to know that you can come back. And if you are kind of over it, right, then it might be nice to sever that tie and feel free.
Mhm. And I think that there is such a empowerment of, if you're not happy where you are, it's, and if you have the power to make that decision to take a career break, that feels different than I'm just going to quit and figure it out. It's like you have intentions, you've got, a plan, especially if you do want to travel during that time and do life a little bit differently for a period of time. I think that that's, absolutely options that are out there that for many people, especially Americans, they don't think about that, because that's not how we're programmed to live life. We're programmed as, well, that's for retirement, but really a break. And I mean, both of us have had more than a year break,
Mhm.
and we've got a decade of perspective since
Yeah.
then. That's such a small blip. I mean, it feels enormous at the time
Mhm.
that you're thinking about it. I mean, just like this massive, massive leap. But then once you take it, you have that perspective looking back and saying, what an amazing part of my life. And thinking about those memories and the things that you did and accomplished. I'm so happy that I mean, I definitely could not do that trip even 10 years. I was like traveling. So we were traveling. My husband and I were traveling so fast. I mean, I could not do that even now.
Mhm.
And I'm just so happy that we did it. Life is short. So, if that is something that I think when I talk to people, it's like this desire that's been there and it's not going away. It's not going to just magically you get, even if you get, let's say, your dream job, you're still going to
Mhm.
want that. So it's like scratch that itch for a little bit and then go and, find that dream job. There's different ways to slice and dice life, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what would you recommend as first steps? Take like career break for dummies. If you're thinking about taking a career break, what would you recommend to somebody as just those first couple like baby steps into exploring what that could look like? Katrina, did I lose you, or that was a
Yeah,
question to
first
you?
getting
Oh, Rose,
here.
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. It's getting clear on your purpose and what you want to get out of this time. I think one of the most important questions you can answer is, what's at risk if I don't take a break? Because so often your brain will fixate on the things that you currently have that you will lose if you took a career break. But some of those things you actually want to lose, but it just feels scary to lose them because, we don't like to have less. And
Yeah.
so your brain will fixate on that and it won't think about or focus on like, what's at risk if I don't? What am I losing by not taking this break? So if you can do some journaling or just ask yourself some of the deeper questions around, what would be my purpose statement for this break, and what would be the 3 to 4 pillars, like the things that I want to focus on, the sort of missions, if you will, of what I need to get out of this time to make it successful. It really helps you understand what's at risk, but also paint a picture of the vision of what it could be so that you can get excited and really imagine, well, wow, if I did that, then, I could reconnect with my family and my loved ones in a way that I haven't been able to in decades. I could go on this learning exploration personal adventure where, I go to like chef school in Italy and like learn how to make the perfect pastry, right? Like whatever your thing is, you could go explore that. And so I think that's really important. So that's where I would start. I think also looking at your finances just to understand, is this something I would have to save for? Is this something I could technically afford now? Kind of like getting a ballpark estimate of how much money would this be, can help you understand like the timeline and the, like the possibility. For me, I had 1,500 out of $38,000. Like I was at the very beginning stages. But what I found is that once I knew that number, I could then make a plan to save that much money. And I did that in 18 months. And so I think that is also a really important piece, because a lot of times your brain will dismiss it like, oh, that's too expensive. Oh, I can't afford it. Oh, like I need to have at least $2 million in retirement and I'm not even close. Like I'm not going to think about that now, where there really is a way that you can afford it. Because to your point, life isn't guaranteed. We don't live forever. Invest, right? Invest in yourself, invest in your well-being, and seize those opportunities as they appear. So
Absolutely. What you were saying about setting goals, that's the number one step of my process too. So that and the finances piece, if you want more details on finances, the live that I did last week was with our financial advisor. So we stepped through that process. So if you want to get some more details on that, just send me a DM if you're watching this, and just say finances, and I'll send you the link to that video directly so you can check that out. And the other thing, so honestly, both of those would apply for sabbaticals as well. Finances, obviously, for a sabbatical would be much smaller in terms of, what it may cost to fund that, but you might be surprised at how little it costs. It's not like taking your 1 or 2 week vacation and multiplying it by however many more weeks. Like you're not traveling in that way. If you are using it to travel, there's different ways to make that overall number significantly lower than you might be expecting. The one other thing I would add on the sabbatical side of things, if you do want to explore that, I recommend looking at your employer's time off, sabbatical, or leave of absence policies. Just look at the fine print. Honestly, it only takes a few minutes. And if you want some more strategies, DM me the word sabbatical and I can send you a guide that steps you through 4 ways to take a sabbatical without quitting your job. So I'd be happy to help you through that. Now, I think that at this point, I'd love to just kind of wrap up. What else, Katrina, is there anything else that you want to make sure you mention? And of course, I'd love for you to share how to get the book and get in touch with you for anybody who has more questions on career breaks.
Yeah, I think the only other thing I would add is I oftentimes get asked, why do people take breaks? Like, what are sort of like the biggest motivators? And I did a survey with my past clients when I was writing this book to figure out like what were their primary motivators, like what were the top, 2 or 3 reasons that they decided to take a break. And I just wanted to share those so that somebody listening to this can feel seen and be like, oh my gosh, like that.
Yeah, no, that's perfect.
Yeah. So, at the top of the list, kind of tied, was burnout and career misalignment. So over I think it was over 60% had one or both of these, where they felt like just burned out from their job, and or like, I'm going down this path that does not suit me and I just need to take a step back and really like reassess my life and my path and my trajectory. Beyond that, there were people that had travel dreams. There were people that needed to really focus on their health, especially their physical health, and kind of recovering from something or getting a diagnosis of something that they didn't have the time to deeply explore and to heal. And then the other big one is quality time with loved ones. So whether that's your family, aging parents, children, or just reconnecting with a sense of community and your friends. But that desire to pour quality time into the people you love is also a big reason that people take breaks. So just so that, if those are one of your reasons, just know that they're like really normal, completely valid reasons to want to take a break.
Absolutely. And good reasons to give yourself permission to take a break.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everything that you listed, I'm sure everybody's like, yeah, that sounds great. I'd love to do that. I mean, besides the burnout, but I think that there is value in just saying you deserve those things. And, if you're in a position right now that you aren't, for example, connecting or giving the quality time to loved ones that you really want, I mean, that alone, you can take some time to do that, and many other things. So it doesn't have to be one thing. It can be a combination of things. But I think that that's really good to call out. And I'm happy that you made sure to point that out, because um, people might be feeling like, oh, well, everybody wants that, but nobody really gets that. It's like, but you have control to make that decision to
Yeah.
get more of, whatever it is in your life. And I think it's just a matter of taking the reins on your life to be able to steer the horse, so to speak, on where you want to go, because so many of us just kind of drift in a direction, and then you find yourself in a place like, where, how did I end up here? So I think a career break, even a sabbatical, I think to a certain extent can help you just refocus and kind of take a step back, look at the big picture of your life and figure out, okay, where do I want to steer that and move that going forward?
Yeah, I think, for me, it really boils down to you're making choices every day. And a lot of us get stuck in this pattern and we don't realize their choices. We think, oh, well, this is what I have to do to be successful. This is what I have to do because, I have a family, or I have these financial requirements, or I have a mortgage, whatever. These things I have to do. These aren't choices. I don't like these things, but they're just what I have to do. And I think when you take a break, you clear this space to really realize that they are choices. And then the ones you don't like, when you come back from that break, you can change. You then feel more empowered because you can make different choices, because you realize they're actually choices. They're not just, givens. And I think that is really important. And to your point, it's something we just sort of find ourselves down these paths because we don't realize that we're actually co-creating this every day by continuing to double down on choices that no longer fit the life that we want.
Absolutely. How can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more, explore? So I guess maybe the one other distinction that I want to
Oh, yeah.
make for viewers is like, if you're thinking about this, like, who should you reach out to and why? So I'm the girl that you reach out to for travel help. So I do all of the travel logistics. Even if you are taking or contemplating taking a career break, something longer. I know I'm saying I help people live abroad for a month, but I do help longer periods of time. But I'm your travel girl. Katrina, you can share, what's your ideal client? How
Yeah.
do you help people more
Yeah.
specific?
I love
Besides getting an amazing book, but
Thanks. I love to talk about travel. I am not your travel girl though, right? Like that is not my jam. Also, I love that you exist, Susie, and that you help people do this because I know it's so important. I'm a certified life coach, and I really lean into the mindset piece, the permission piece, the managing fear piece, the questioning. How do I navigate this period of uncertainty piece? And the how do I structure time off where I'm not doing and hustling and grinding? And how do I live in this space where I'm reevaluating my identity? So all of that sort of more existential stuff that makes your break delightful and makes you feel empowered and gives you sort of that insight. That's definitely my jam. And I love working on longer breaks. So I would say, I have done 2-month breaks. That's the shortest I've gone. But 3 months or longer, 6 to 12 is kind of a sweet spot. But when you're thinking about that longer sort of time to marinate and sit in all of these thoughts and changes and creating that transformation, like that's really what I like to lean into.
fantastic. And how do people pre-order the book?
Please pre-order the it's going to be so good. I'm so excited. You can find it on Amazon, you can find it on Barnes and Noble, you can find it on Target. So basically, if you just even Googled taking a career break for dummies, you will find it. However, if you are watching this on LinkedIn and you come to my profile, you'll see on my profile there's a link, very easy to find, where you can just click that and be taken to Amazon to pre-order.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And if you are thinking about the travel side of things and really figuring out, when can I do this? How can I do this? I have free complimentary 30-minute calls to dig into exactly that. So if you are thinking that this is something that you want to do, let's say in the next year, let's get down. It's a very strategy-based phone call to figure out for your personal situation, how do you do that? So if you're interested in that, just DM me the word call and I'll send you the link to get that all booked. But Katrina, thank you so much for joining me. I am so happy and excited for you and the launch of your book. I'm sure November can't come soon enough to have a physical copy in your hand after
Yeah.
months and over a year of writing it. But I'm excited to get a copy myself. And, thank you again so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And, if you're watching the replay or anything, again, do not hesitate to put any questions on there or reach out to us individually with any specific questions. Thanks so much for joining. Have a good one.